Hi, this is Vicki with Crafting for Fun. Today I'm here to show you how I made this card. It is white on white, which may be a little bit difficult to see on the video, but the thing that I like about this card is that it's very simple yet striking because it uses a couple of different embossing folders to add some embossed detail to this card, and there are several layers for additional interest. So the only things you'll need in addition to white paper or whatever color paper you decide to use is a sentiment stamp and ink, and then some embossing folders to add detail, and of course you'll need a border punch if you like to add border detail like I have. So let me gather my supplies and I'll show you exactly what I used to create this card. To create today's card, you will need to begin with a piece of cardstock. I have a piece of 8.5 by 11 inch ultra smooth white cardstock. I happen to be using the Spectrum Noir cardstock because it is 100 pound weight, but any good quality white cardstock will work. You're also going to need a couple of punches. You're going to need a border punch. I'm using the Stampin' Up! Scallop border punch, and then I'm going to also use the Stampin' Up! Bitty butterfly punch. I believe that's the name of that punch. You're going to need some kind of a sentiment to go on your stamp. I do suggest something small. This is just a single stamp by Inkadinkado, and it says, "For with God nothing shall be impossible," Luke 1:37. And I just like this stamp for the purpose that I'm going to use it for, so I chose that. And then some kind of ink, and I'm going to be using Early Espresso ink by Stampin' Up! In addition to that, you'll need 2 embossing folders. You'll need, I'm going to use the Perfect Polka Dots embossing folder by Stampin' Up! And that's just to give my butterflies some additional detail. And then you'll need some kind of an image stamp for the center, or some kind of an image embossing folder for the front focal image on your card. And today I'm using the Grass embossing folder by Doris. There are some other embossing folders that would work, but you'll need to experiment with what's available to you. So let me show you how I created the card base itself. You'll need to begin by cutting your cardstock down to 5.5 by 8.5. You won't use all of this sheet of cardstock, but you'll use a good portion of it. So there I have my 2 pieces. They're each 5.5 by 8.5. I'm going to set one aside for my card base, and then I'm going to take the other one and I'm going to cut off 2.5 inches. So I'm going to have a piece that's 2.5. So that piece is 2.5 by 5.5. So 2.5 by 5.5, and then 5.5 by 8.5. And then I'm going to use a small piece of this later on for my butterflies, but I'll come back to that later. So now I'm going to grab my scoring tool. I prefer to use the scoring tool rather than my paper trimmer for scoring because I think it gives me crisper, deeper score lines. So I'm going to lay my cardstock with my 8.5 inch side at the top, and I'm going to score at 4 1/4 inches, and then I'm going to take that off, and I'm going to need to bring back my cutter one more time. I'm going to need to, so now my card is scored in half, and that would give me a standard card base. But what I want to do is I want to cut off 2 inches of that card. So on the side that would be the front of my card, I'm going to trim off 2 inches. Now these 2 pieces are both important, so I need to keep those. So I'm going to just show you now how to go ahead and create the kind of the guts of the card. So I'm going to set these 2 pieces aside and come back to the one that is 2.5 by 5.5. And I'm going to take my scallop border punch and I'm going to punch that along one long edge. So I'm just centering it up now within my punch. And I'm just going to go ahead and line that up so I can punch along one long edge. It's kind of, the lighting makes it a little more difficult for me to see. So I'm just going to flip that there. There we go. So those are scraps, and I'm finished with my border punch. And now I'm going to set that piece aside, and I'm going to come back to my card, and I'm going to fold it on my center fold line. And before I do anything else with my base card, this is what it looks like now. It has one long side in the back and a short side in the front. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment, because we all know if you mess up on this part of your card, you'll need to start over again or find some kind of a workaround. So I'm going to ink up my stamp, and I want to stamp this sentiment near the bottom, but as far over towards this right hand edge as I can. So I'm going to do this without my Stamp-A-Majig. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. So you'll see it just clears my flap, and you're going to see why we do this part of the card first. So I like to take this piece that I've scalloped, the scalloped edge piece, and apply it next. And how much scallop you can leave showing is really going to depend on how far over you've stamped your sentiment. You can see that I'm going to have to put mine fairly far in. I hope you can see that. So that I don't, there's my scallop piece, so that I don't cover up my sentiment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my scallop piece down, and I like to apply adhesive to the inside of my card flap, because that's ultimately where it's going to be stuck. And I'm going to use my grid here as just to help me line things up. I'm going to take my card to my scallop piece and line things up the way I want, and press everything down. I hope you can see my scallop piece is applied there. And when I close my card, my scallop is even for the length of the front, and it clears my sentiment. So now I'm ready to go on and build the rest of my card. So this is kind of what I call the guts of the card, and I'm going to set that aside. Now I'm going to bring back my 2 embossing folders, and I'm going to take the piece that is 2 inches by 5.5, that's the part that we cut off of the front of the card, and I'm going to put it inside of my embossing folder. Now it may be difficult for you to see this, but there are some cattails and some tall grass in here, and I particularly like a certain section of this embossing folder, so I'm just centering it up so I can get the part that I like. I don't know whether you'll be able to see that or not. So I've got it centered inside of there, and I'm ready to run that through my embossing machine. And then I also told you you would need a scrap of this for embellishing your butterfly. I'm just going to cut off a piece, not even a very big piece. Just going to stick that inside of my perfect polka dots embossing folder, and I'm ready to run that through. So I'm going to grab my Big Shot machine, and I'll show you how we're going to finish up this card. Okay, I have my Big Shot machine set up here, and I'm going to take my multi-purpose platform, and I'm going to open it up to tab 1. And I'm going to lay that down in my Big Shot machine. And then I'm going to take my embossing folder that has my 2 inch by 5.5 inch piece in it, and I'm going to go ahead and sandwich that between 2 clear acrylic plates, and I'm going to run that through my Big Shot machine. And I'm sorry to reach across, I should have positioned the handle on the side closest to me. So, pardon me, what I have now is a thin embossed piece, and let's see if I can pick that up, that has my grass and cattails and weeds embossed on it. So I'm going to set that piece aside, and I'm going to come back with a second embossing folder that has just a scrap piece of perfect polka dots in it. And I'm going to also sandwich that between 2 clear acrylic plates, and I'm going to turn this around so that I don't have to actually have my arm in front of the camera. And I'm going to run that through, and what I'm going to end up with is a piece of scrap that is embossed with a polka dot pattern on it. So now I'm finished with my Big Shot. I'm going to clean up all of those items and set them aside. And I'm bring back my 2 embossed pieces and my base card, and I'm ready to start assembling. So I'm going to take my embossed piece with the grass on it, and I'm going to go ahead and put some pop dots on the back of that. I just want to raise it up because this is a tone-on-tone card, white on white. So the dimension is really adds an important detail to this. And maybe one more. Very generous with the pop dots on this. So I'm going to remove the liners. Now when I put this on the front of the card, the front panel here is actually 2 1/4 inches by 5 1/2, so I am going to center this up in the middle, and I find it easiest to do if I lay that down and kind of, again, center everything up. So now I don't know if you can see, but I have my edge detail there, and then I have a 1/4 or about a 1/16 of an inch border there, and my embossed piece is raised up and my sentiment is there on the flap. So that's what I have so far. So now I'm going to take my piece that is embossed with the polka dots, this scrap, and I'm just going to punch out a couple of butterflies. And 2 is probably enough. I'm just going to take my butterflies and I'm going to kind of bend them in half in the middle, and I just kind of use my fingernails to crease that. And I'm going to take some Crystal Effects glue, and I usually have to put a pin in there to make sure my path is opened. And I'm just going to take 1 dot of glue on the back of each butterfly, and this does dry clear, but you want to be careful with it, because if you accidentally get it on your fingers and get it somewhere on the card where you don't want it, it will leave a shiny mark. And in a card that is tone on tone, it is very difficult to hide flaws like a big shiny mark, so you do want to be careful. And I'm just positioning these just somewhere on the card where I think it looks good. Now it doesn't take very long for the Crystal Effects to dry, but that is basically how the card will look. So I'm going to wait till it's completely dry before I attempt to write on it or put it in an envelope. But this is a very, very simple card, just all white cardstock with a stamped sentiment, but it's visually very interesting because it's got lots of layers and lots of embossing. It's a really fun technique, and it's just something new and different that you could try with your embossing folders and whatever cardstocks you have on hand. This could easily also be done with a colored cardstock. So if you have any questions about this technique, please email me at craftingforfun@gmail.com, or you can check out my blog, craftingforfun.blogspot.com, for additional craft ideas. Come back soon. Thanks.